On today's podcast episode of the Thermostat with Jason Barger, I'm joined by Tom Rath, #1 New York Times bestselling author of books like How Full Is Your Bucket, StrengthsFinder 2.0, Eat, Move, Sleep, and Life's Great Question. His new book, What's the Point? Turning Purpose into Your Daily Superpower, has now been released. Tom and I have a great conversation about strengths, about finding meaning and purpose in daily moments every single day, and how do we build cultures that care for people and set a temperature that people want to be a part of. I hope you'll stay tuned and dive into today's episode. Welcome back to the Thermostat with Jason Barger. If you're currently on a commute, a walk, or just a micro break in your day, glad you're making time to step back, to think, and to reflect on the next steps on your journey. I've never been more convinced the best leaders and team cultures in the world are the ones that make time to step back, breathe in good oxygen, and calibrate their thermostat. I hope today's conversation leaves you feeling grounded and inspired. Now let's dive into today's topic to engage our minds and hearts in order to authentically lead and create compelling cultures wherever we are in the world. Hey everybody, it's Jason and welcome back to the Thermostat podcast, wherever you are and however you're coming to the podcast today. Welcome in. So glad you are here. We have over 335 episodes or something like that. We're in season 10 of the podcast. And so glad that this continues to find so many great people out there. If you're one of the OGs that have been with us from the very beginning, so glad that this continues to add value to your life and your work. And if you are new to the podcast, then so glad you are here. Again, all you need to do with this 335 episodes. So if you want to go through the whole catalog, Google my name, Jason Barger, and whatever topic you're looking for as it relates to leadership and culture and communication, trust, accountability, whatever it is you're looking for, chances are you're going to find it. And you're also going to see some great conversations that I've had. And we're going to have another one today with some great guests that I've been lucky to have join me, thought leaders and friends and colleagues from around that join me in this thinking about how are we developing people and culture in the world today. My commitment to you, always the listener, is every time we record one of these, I want this to be an opportunity for you to step back in your own life, to think about the temperature that you're trying to set in your life and your work, and hopefully to have some good oxygen breathed into you. So glad you're with us today. If you'll do me the quick favor, of course, I keep being reminded, you got to hopefully rate the podcast 5 stars on whatever platform you're on. If you haven't subscribed, please do that. I keep being told, if you can, in your own words, authentic to you, review the podcast. If there's episodes that resonate with you, use your own words, not AI bots, but your own words to celebrate what is it and why are these messages important in the world. And then lastly, every time you share the podcast with somebody else, that certainly helps us and amplifies these messages. So thanks for everybody for being here and excited about today. I'm excited to invite in my guest for today in just one moment. Tom Rath is a #1 New York Times bestselling author whose books, including How Full Is Your Bucket, StrengthsFinder 2.0, Eat, Move, Sleep, and Life's Great Question, have sold more than 10 million copies worldwide. A researcher focused on how work affects health and well-being, Tom began his career at Gallup, where he helped develop strengths-based tools used by millions. He is currently the co-founder and CEO of CareerSight and lives in Arlington, Virginia, with his wife and 2 children. His most recent book, What's the Point? Turning Purpose into Your Daily Superpower, was just released this spring. I have been familiar with Tom's work for many years now and have utilized StrengthsFinder as a terrific tool for personal and team development. And so it's great to now have him on the guest of the Thermostat podcast with Jason Barger. So welcome to the podcast, Tom.
Thanks so much. It's good to be talking with you, Jason.
Absolutely. Glad to have you here. And so what I like to do when we have new guests on here is that if my listeners aren't familiar with you, again, that great bio, and we're going to talk about the work that you're doing, but what's something that people wouldn't know about you beyond the bio or the books you've written? What's something that the audience wouldn't know or that I wouldn't know about you?
Well, I think one of the things that I've found in the last few years really surprises people is that as a product of the first book I worked on, which was How Full Is Your Bucket, the business book that kind of started a big conversation in that audience, it went on to spawn a children's book that's now probably a lot of people have kids using in the 1st and 2nd grade across the country. That's kind of a standard behavioral strategy that's been fun to see how a conversation that starts in the business world a few decades later can now be found a home there that's been really fun for kids to use across the country.
That's awesome. And you're on the Thermostat with Jason Barger podcast. So I like to also ask this question of, related to the temperature that you're trying to set in your life and your work, how do you, how would you articulate that for just where you are in life right now? What's the temperature that you're trying to set?
It's a great question because it's changed a lot more in the last 12 months than I ever would have thought would be possible at my older age now. I think, I came out of college in 1998, right around the time when the internet was exploding and everything else. And I thought that was just the opportunity of a lifetime, got real involved in, as you mentioned, the development of StrengthsFinder and trying to convert all these interviews to internet-based stuff. And I didn't know if I'd ever seen anything like that again. I didn't think I would. But with all the technology that's emerged in the last 12 to 18 months, now I feel like I'm a kid in a candy store again, running at a whole different cadence. And I'm probably driving all the people that work with me crazy because it's just pushing around the clock for more and more and more. So I feel like I'm fortunate to be running at a temperature that I didn't know I was still capable of, to be honest.
That's awesome. Well, I want to talk. I want to start in our chat today too about the StrengthsFinder because I've certainly used it. I've seen the power of the tool. It's had the impact that it has on teams and on relationships, and I just think human beings in general. But I'm interested. How has the StrengthsFinder, knowing even your results and maybe the people around you, how has it impacted your particular life?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the kind of basis of how I orient a lot of my energy in a day, kind of looking around. And the thing I've learned to do over the last 10 or 15 years, much more strategically, is to say, I need to look at what the big needs are of people in the world, whether that's my family, my people I work with, or the customers and clients we serve, or readers, or my community, and say, what do other people need? And then work back to what my strengths are and who I am and how I can use some of those to meet those needs. And I think that's one of the things I realized I was working on this new book, What's the Point, is that with any self-awareness tool, if you just go out there and say, this is what I know about myself, I'm going to beat that into the world, it's not very useful. And we really need to start by looking at what people around us need and then connecting those dots back.
Yeah, no, what are your top five, by the way?
I really lead with kind of the futuristic thing
Yeah.
and learner and intellection. Pretty analytical as a researcher, but I'm just a sponge for. I mean, a morning where I don't have 2 hours to just learn and discover new information is a really challenging spot for me.
Yeah. Well, I've found it to be a powerful thing is when I talk with teams and organizations around emotional intelligence, the beginning of emotional intelligence is understanding of yourself. And so, that first kind of personal competency side of self-awareness is, am I even aware not only of what I'm seeing and feeling and thinking in this moment, but do I know things like the way I'm wired and the strengths that I bring to this situation? And then as we practice the social competency side of understanding somebody else, then we're able to use that awareness to better the relationship. And so I've seen it as a powerful tool, certainly in my marriage. I've seen it as a powerful tool within teams and organizations, but giving people a better understanding and language to make sense of that emotional intelligence. So, for me to have the language, my top five are belief and strategic, ideation, and then activator and maximizer. It gave me language to better understand how I naturally show up to situations. And really, then my life and my career has evolved. You've seen that there's a reason why I've probably fallen into the places that I have, and certainly pursued things is in alignment with those strengths. So it's a powerful tool for emotional intelligence.
Yeah, it's been neat to see the conversation that started and continues.
Yeah, it's awesome. Well, let's talk about your new book and the focus, this idea of purpose as a superpower. First and foremost, tell us what you mean by that and what compelled you to write now this next thing that you're sharing with the world.
Yeah, when I first started working on this book, I was trying to pull together all of the discoveries from the research I've been a part of and the research that I've studied that are most applicable and helpful and practical to help people think about how they live more energized, stronger, and more meaningful lives and careers, and trying to pull together. So whether you're looking for a job, mid-career, late career, was really trying to pull together all the best pieces. And the more I've studied that and anchored it, I realized that kind of meaning or purpose or mission are the outcomes that are really important from a good career. So I started by working on a book that was titled Purpose Unlocked, was our working title. And as I got deeper and deeper into the research about what can people actually do about it and how can they change things on a daily basis to have more purpose in their life, I realized pretty quickly that 90% of us, when we hear the word purpose, it just gives us anxiety about some big mythological thing we need to find or chase that descends from the heavens on a sunny day, and it's one big thing, right?
Yep.
And so as I studied that work, I realized it would be a strategic mistake to have a main title of the book that's all about purpose when it's really about just asking simple questions. Say, what's the point of this meeting? What's the point of spending 30 minutes answering these emails? What's the point of 30 minutes editing this book? And if you ask that question throughout the day, just kind of going back to how full is your bucket, which was just a simple question to make sure you're having better interactions with other people all day.
Yep.
That's what leads to more purpose over the span of a week, a month, a year, or a decade. If you can ask that question and say, how do I build 5, 10, 15 purposeful interactions into each day? That purpose is really more like a garden that you tend to and plant seeds in every day. And it's less like some big thing you need to find, essentially. So we reoriented the whole book to help people say, how do I architect each day to make sure that I'm not only prioritizing and scheduling and making time for things that are meaningful and create purpose, but then that you're also spending time on the relationships that matter. And you're taking stock at the end of each day to say, that 30-minute conversation with a colleague of mine or a team member really did matter and it did count, and that was a purpose-building conversation, and you have to acknowledge that at the end of the day to make sure you do more of it, essentially. So that's where I think we took an important detour in working on this book, because the subtitle of the book is Turning Purpose into Your Daily Superpower. And I think that's a better mindset for people to have than looking at purpose as a new job or a big shift or that type of thing.
Yeah, no, I love that idea, and certainly my listeners, there's great synergy, which is I think why we connected in the first place, and why we're having this conversation is that kind of micro purpose, and seeing that, yeah, purpose not as this big, somebody comes riding in on a white horse and is gonna, announce what this grandiose thing is, but in the small moments of every single day. But and part of what my listeners will resonate with is when we talk about setting the temperature and understanding what you're aiming for, it really starts with proactively knowing that, wait, why are we even doing what we're doing?
Mm-hmm.
And in each meeting, in each moment, as you sit down to have that one-on-one, if you're sitting to have a cup of coffee with somebody in a relationship, whatever that is, but to be first starting with and proactive about, well, what's the mission and the purpose of this gathering? What's
Right.
the meaning for it? And to make sure that we're orienting ourselves that way. And in that case, I think it does become that superpower that it helps us to stay aligned. Obviously Simon Sinek's work, Start With Why, and
Mm-hmm.
he made the concept of the golden circle, which is a concept that's been around for a long, long time, but he kind of brought it to the forefront for everybody. But that training ourselves to work from the inside rather than the inside out rather than the outside in. And that piece of it, I think about Tamara Miles and Wes Adams, who have been guests on this, that just came out with the book around meaningful work. And we continue to see that people are thirsty for finding, even in these small
Mm-hmm.
moments, meaning of how their contributions matter to something.
Right.
And I think it's great. You say that, follow your passion persists as advice despite there being other evidence. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think if you just look at this, semantics do matter when you're giving big, bold advice to people entering the workforce, for example. And when you look at find what you're passionate about and follow that, there are a lot of people who are very passionate about golf or travel or all kinds of pursuits. And I was really passionate about basketball growing up, but no matter how much I tried and practiced, with my height and genetics and other things, that was not in the cards, right? So just saying follow your passion, I think, is kind of skimming the surface. The problem with passion is that it starts with you, and it doesn't have the same inherent presumption of doing something that makes a difference for society, like meaning or mission or purpose is probably the best anchor out of all those, in my opinion. Because when you say find something that builds purpose into your work, inherent in that is that what you're doing makes a positive contribution to another human being. So I would argue that if you're, I mean, there are a few things. I mean, you could be doing something you're really passionate about that doesn't make a difference for people, like I mentioned, or you could be manufacturing cigarettes or running a casino, or I don't know, some things that I would argue don't have a great deal of purpose in it when you look at the net effect it has on a bunch of other people, right? So, and back to your point, I think you're absolutely right that especially the generation entering the workforce today and more recently, they have a higher expectation about doing work that does serve a collective good. And even though I meet some managers and leaders my age who kind of crab around about it, about their high maintenance or whatever, I like it. And I think it's a good thing. And that's one of the aspects that I think makes me hopeful about the future, because I think people do want to walk into the work world today and find some things that are making a more positive contribution and be in roles where they can see that, or they have a good manager or good leader who's helping them to connect some of those dots when it's a less direct impact and contribution through several layers and so forth, which is its own challenge.
Yeah, I just did a podcast about engaging Gen Z culturally, and we went through all the stereotypes that are out there that exist, and of course, in the way that people talk about this generation, and yet then we kind of looked at it and with context of the world that they've lived through and where they are right now, and that some of these questions, especially related to purpose and meaning, might be signs actually of advancement. That these younger folks are not just saying, "Hey, give me a job," but they are saying, "I want to do something that I believe in and I feel like matters and that there's a greater sense of contribution to it." And that's not a bad thing. And
Right.
so I'm wondering, like, if there's Gen Z or younger generations out there, that are entering the workforce or soon to be entering the workforce, what advice do you give to them when they hear this noise out there about that it's stereotyping them? What advice would you give?
You know, the single best piece of advice I would give people, and I've spent the last 3 to 5 years working on this pretty intensively just for the sake of my own kids, because they're 15 and 17 right now, is that you have to do some intentional things as early as possible in your career and life just to widen the aperture of what you see that's out there right now. I did the math on this when I was thinking about it for my daughter, and I went and looked at all the Bureau of Labor Statistics data, and you would need to have awareness and exposure to 50 different careers just to know half of what's out there in the US workforce right now. And most of us, and so I've interviewed my kids and I've done surveys on this and looked at it, most of us make huge choices about where to spend 2, 4, 6 years of our education and go into a job. And we've seen 2 or 3, maybe 4 or 5, if we're lucky, jobs that are out there. So we're looking out of a tiny little pinhole with maybe 3 to 5% aperture to what's out there. And if that's accurate, which I've done a lot of the work on this,
Yep.
then it means that even by the time most of us are mid-career, the end of our career, there's an 80 or 90% chance that we haven't even had exposure to the thing we could have been best at in life, right? We just haven't seen it. So you
Yep.
can't answer a survey about what your passions are, your strengths or interests or any of that if you don't know what you don't know. And so I would encourage young people to say, you know what, you have to see at least 10 more careers and options than just what mommy did and what daddy did and what money's telling you to do, right?
Yep.
And do that first, and then think about what you might be good at in that context. And the good news is, and I feel like this might feel glib when I say this, but if you're displaced in AI, one thing you can kind of fall back on is that there's a 90% chance you're in the wrong job to start with, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, reinvention can be okay in the next 5 years.
Yeah, and I think not just okay, but I think it's gonna be mandatory. You know,
Right.
I think it's gonna be a part of really the world that we're all living in is the opportunity to reinvent yourself, but also the opportunity to say, "Huh, how I may approach something differently now. And there
Right.
may be something that I've known nothing about, but that the reality is that my strengths and my skills and the thing that I maybe was uncovered about my passion that I didn't know, that maybe there's a better place that to really go put that to work. And
Right.
and I think there's going to be there already is right now, but I think there is going to be those opportunities to for people to find something that they maybe in the past when you just got dug in and had the same career for 40 years, you didn't have a chance to find.
Yeah, I mean,
Do
I think I've noticed, and this again, I think could be a positive thing, that if we can kind of reimagine our relationship with whatever this work thing is, and that dynamic where it's going to be more, you're going to need to be more nimble. Things will move in cycles. It's a lot more spiky. It's not some smooth climb where things are always getting better. And you may have multiple things that are bringing in streams of active and passive income, and there's a very different dynamic to it. And I think that could be good for people because you bring in more variety instead of just falling into some default, which is how most of us are in jobs right now. I've been joking. I started joking around with some of my team about this because we're trying to build an application to give people more exposure to jobs. And I was saying to him that I honestly believe, the more I've gotten into this, that if we just took kids when they graduated from high school and randomized them into jobs, we might have a better byproduct right now. And so I think if we can encourage people to have more exposure, make more informed decisions, things should turn out better.
Yeah, I think there's some that's interesting. I wanna think about that a little bit, but that's an interesting thought. I know you talk about productivity culture,
Mm-hmm.
and also certainly your background in thinking more about wellness of humans and but this idea of productivity culture optimizes efficiency over meaning. And say more about that because I when I hear that, I certainly tend to agree, but I wanna hear more about what you mean by that. But before we dive into that topic, let's take a break. Let's pause for a second, and we'll be right back. Many teams and organizations right now are realizing that they need to do both. They need to engage the minds and hearts of their people in person, where everyone in the room can experience the energy of congregating together and find clarity for the road ahead. And they also need to continue to find ways to engage the minds and hearts of their people virtually, with those who are working remotely or at a distance. So, if you are in the process of planning your next team meeting, company all-hands event, conference, or culture summit, and are looking for support with a powerful keynote speech, facilitated team conversations that are the currency for change, or deeper development on leadership mindset and an intentional strategy for the culture you're trying to create, I hope you'll contact us at jasonvbarger.com, jasonvbarger.com. It is my privilege and our honor to partner with great people to provide support in these areas. We want to breathe oxygen into your leaders and throughout your organization so you can set the temperature you want for your culture. We look forward to connecting with you soon.
Yeah, and I think it's important for your listeners who manage or lead other people in particular, where there's been a 100+ year industrial mindset that kind of seeped into the modern workforce that's about more hours worked equals better productivity.
Yep.
And almost every manager, leader I've worked for in my career, executives I've worked with and coached and spent time with,
Yep.
they always have this mindset of, I want to be the first one into work, the last one to leave. I want people to see me working around the clock. I eat my lunch over my keyboard, and I am responsive when I'm on vacation. But then those leaders have kind of learned in the last 5 or 10 years that most of us kind of want to have a life too, and a family life and all that. So they say, oh, but I want my people to have well-being, and they pay for these wellness programs that don't do anything. And they talk a good game around it. But what I've learned and said to leaders in as challenging a way as I possibly can is, if you're not being a good role model and example in your own life with that, and you're still emailing when you're at the beach, no one else feels permission to do anything else in your culture or in your work team, right?
Absolutely.
So, and it turns out that that's bad for everyone in that cycle, because, I mean, I've worked with leaders in the military and hard charging work environments where if you have workers who are continually have sleep disruption, they come to work and I mean, they have almost the equivalent of being intoxicated by 2 or 3 or 4 in the afternoon, right? And
Yep.
none of us want that person in meetings with us. So I think to have a workplace culture that really values everyone showing up with as much energy as possible each day so they can be their best instead of this kind of ultra achievement sacrifice oriented culture, it comes back around and results in something that's better for long-term productivity and quality and retention from all the data that I've looked at.
No, my listeners' ears are perking up right now because when they hear this, they've heard me talk about the fact that around personal biorhythms and us redefining what does being at your best when your best is needed really mean, and really, deconstructing and trying to understand what really does high performance look like. And I absolutely agree with you that we have honored, Plato said, what is honored will be cultivated. And so for years we honored this, that mentality. I'm the first one in, the last to leave. I've kind of made fun of some sports references on this podcast at different times. The all gas, no brakes, mantra around leadership, and like that's going to be our culture. And yet then we're surprised when that doesn't produce high performing work and people start to be broken down, and you start to deconstruct that you can't literally play football with all gas, no brakes, but you also can't lead any part of your life. You can't literally drive a car with all gas, no brakes, let alone like a relationship or operating your work or your life that way. And so this desire, this conversation around wellness, in my opinion, is really about saying, how can we optimize ourselves as human beings? Because I want to be a great dad. I want to be a great husband. I want to be a great friend. And oh, by the way, I want to do really quality work, and I want to be the best I possibly can at my job. And there's a component of rest and renewal and recharge that allows me to be at my best when my best is needed. It's not this consistent grind.
And I wrote a book on this called Are You Fully Charged? Probably 7 years ago.
Yep.
And the big takeaway for me from all that work was that those moments that produce energy and make a difference, it's really about daily habits. And it's these little things during the day. It's not like big changes in your diet or big changes in your sleep structure or your activity. It's just having these little wins throughout the day where like one night of good sleep is kind of like the reset button on a video game, and you get a whole new start no matter how bad the day was before. And if you can just budget to get at least 7, ideally 8 hours of sleep, you got a new start. You're more likely to be active, move around throughout the day, show people that you value getting outdoors, being active, getting some time moving around your office. And if you can structure the way you're eating throughout the day so you have more energy early on in the day, and you can see how food makes you a more energetic and better parent at 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening, it leads to these upward spirals that keep going. Right. So I think so many people, it's similar to the purpose thing, where you imagine that being more energized in the day is about these grand changes, and it's really not. It's just about 10 quick wins throughout the day that create the upward spiral, essentially.
Yep, those daily habits.
That's a big leadership value that people don't talk about in the context of leadership or engagement enough.
No doubt. I've been saying on this, I think in the next 10 years, the way we talk about leadership, this idea around personal biorhythm, understanding ourselves and these daily habits. James Clear, the author of Atomic Habits, a friend of mine, he's been on this podcast before. We've talked about this very thing of those small adjustments in habits, and to think about what is the culture that I'm trying to create in my own life. And the way that I choose to own and operate how I'm going to show up, again, to my relationships, but also the work that I do. And those small adjustments over time, a little by little, a little becomes a lot. And when we think about that from a culture shaping perspective across a team or organization, people start to see, oh, okay, this is what Tom really values. And this talk around honoring this type of work and the way we approach it and how we take care of ourselves so that we can be at our best when our best is needed. If we honor that over time, that's what we end up cultivating as a culture. And people began to see that difference. So I agree with you. I think in the next 10 years, it's going to be more commonplace that that's just the way we talk about leadership, is not that top of the pyramid power control structure, but this bottom of the pyramid leader that is
Right.
thinking about how they show up in that way. Absolutely agree with you. AI, we got to mention that, but advancing, becoming more normalized. Again, I think there's things out there that's certainly scary to people, and things but there's also things that are going to come out that are going to be opportunistic, and things that we'd be able to leverage this. But what role do you see humans playing in organizations in the future? What's the Tom Rath answer to that?
I've been so deeply immersed in early learning and investing in things with some of these AI large language models that it's changed my personal workflow more in the last 18 months than anything in my entire career. And so I spend, and I started doing this about a year ago, where I spend a huge chunk of my day just having different machines and Claude co-work sessions, for example, that are working on different topics, some around health, some around finance, some around the career things we're doing. And I realized pretty quickly that it meant this technology meant that every morning I show up in my office, I have to step up my game personally, at least 5 to 10x, and I can produce 5 to 10 times as much content, applications, technologies, things that we're working on. And the minute I realized that, my thought wasn't, oh, now I can save costs and replace the people I work with most closely. My thought was, I love working with these people. They're really smart too. And I need to have a very candid conversation and say to the 5 people that I work with most directly, this is the new world. We all have to step up 5 to 10x. And you need to have as much or more expertise on AI as I do, whether that means we would do a bunch of stuff together or training classes or whatever, so that we can look like a team of 50 instead of a team of 5.
Mm,
Right.
yep.
And having that kind of level setting conversation to say this is a huge shift, we all have to relearn, we all have to be open minded and figure out if we can move at a cadence that we wouldn't have even thought was possible a year ago. It's been really good, and I think I've seen far more speed than I expected. And I've also learned, and I've been building some tools that kind of help me to do this, to say each morning when I log in, what are the 3 things that are the biggest priorities that some of my LLM tools could be helpful with, and it helps me to be diagnostic around that in my own app I've built. And I also have one question that asks me every morning. It says, it's almost certain that you're not thinking big enough this morning about what's possible. So what can we think about that you still don't think you're capable of doing or working on? And it's
Mm,
challenging me every day to say, how do you think bigger, essentially? Right.
yeah. Yep.
So it's, I mean, I think anyone that tells you they really know what it's capable of right now is probably underestimating things. So it's been a fun reminder for me every day to say, how can we help people even more, scale even more, reach more people with all these tools that are becoming available? And I'm really excited to see where it goes.
Yeah, so which is a great message, because you hear a lot of doom and gloom out there, and you hear about this mentality of kind of cutting rather than saying, how do we leverage these tools and maximize what it is that we're trying to do, which is really what I hear you saying is, how can I really open myself up to a different way of working and effectiveness in the world myself, but also how do I begin to leverage that with the culture of my team and what we're trying to do together, and that it's going to amplify things. It's not decreasing human effort. It's actually just changing the way that we think about it. In my mind, and my listeners certainly this will resonate with, is, we talk about the Eisenhower matrix tool, or we've used that if you're familiar with the Eisenhower matrix. And when I'm with teams and organizations and we're doing even an audit of where do we bring our focus and our attention on a day-to-day basis, we know in this very busy and distracted world, it's easy to get stuck on the left-hand side of the Eisenhower matrix, which is things that feel urgent but aren't really all that important.
Mm-hmm.
Or even worse than that, the bottom left-hand quadrant is things that are not urgent and not important. And yet we can just keep ourselves busy all day long, just, crossing off things on our to-do list. And really what I heard you saying is that toggling in our mind is to stay on the right-hand side of the quadrant, which is things that are urgent and important. And what are we giving our focus and our attention, and how are we leveraging these tools in that space? But also the bottom right-hand part of that matrix is not urgent, but important. Those big questions that we're trying to answer, those things that might be further down that I don't have answers to, but yet can leverage some of this technology to begin to work on those things. And what I just heard you say is kind of the more intentionality of bringing our sight line to that right side of the quadrant to make sure that's what we're giving our focus and our energy to.
I think that's important. I would also, though, the one thing I've learned I love it when I challenge my own assumptions and turn out to be wrong. And one thing I would have thought 18 months ago that I think I was incorrect is that I would have thought that there are a lot of people who really don't get into the kind of building and the creative side of things, and that's perfectly fine because they can achieve a lot and get a lot of things done and respond even faster and better and so forth. And the more I got into AI and worked through some of this, I would be concerned if most of your job is responding instead of initiating in particular, and you're replying to things. And I every day I find a new way to automate something that's kind of routinized that saves me time throughout the day. That's a part of my daily AI build list.
Yep.
And so I think all of us have to build more of an identity around how can I be a builder? How can I be a creator? How can I use technology to do a lot more instead of being more of a responder or consumer throughout the day? And so, I mean, even if I think about my kids and their careers and entering the workforce, it doesn't matter out of the 50 jobs I've been profiling, it doesn't matter what of the 50 jobs they do. They need to know how to use AI to make a difference in all 50 of those fields, right? And so if you just continue responding and scrolling and consuming, which is what most people do today, and sleepwalking through things, there is a very high chance your job will be automated. And so I think we've got to challenge ourselves to build some new skill sets there if we want to get ahead of that and be the ones taking advantage of it. And it's a good analog is kind of the thing with our smartphones, right? Where I think smartphones can be amazing tools. You don't have to just completely dismiss their capability if we use them for good and as tools versus letting the smartphone run our day. And the same kind of dynamics can apply with AI, where if you kind of just consume and let AI steer you around, you're at a much greater risk and threat. Whereas if you learn to use AI to do a lot more, you're going to be fine no matter what industry you're in my opinion.
Yeah, no doubt. And again, my listeners, what I hear you saying is this is the difference between thermometer thinking, which is purely reactionary, and that's just responding to the things that are coming at us, and that keeps us in the scroll mode and all that, to shifting to that thermostat thinking. What do I proactively, what am I trying to get out in front of? What is it I need to learn? What do I want to do differently? What is that future that I'm trying to create? And that toggling from that thermometer thinking to that thermostat thinking. And I agree with you. I think that's where the tools have the greatest opportunity to help us live in a new way that we operate each day. Yeah. Okay, we're almost at our time, but I wondered, I always any questions that you would have for me, or anything that you want to talk about to end our time together.
You know, I'm curious as you talk about some of the dynamics with teams and where the future's headed in particular, and how work teams collaborate better using these new tools and technologies. What are some of the big opportunities you see out there, or new tools or new dynamics that leaders are getting excited about?
I think from a leadership perspective, my quick answer to that, which is a great question, but my quick answer to it is that I think leaders are recognizing, coming out of the pandemic, it was this obviously a lot of remote work, a lot of just separate, everybody go do your thing. And I think more and more now, leaders are realizing that there's power in congregation, and that even though we need to be nimble and agile, and we're going to continue to have this remote work in many cases, but also I think more and more leaders are recognizing the connectivity that they need to be in congregation with their people. and to be more intentional about setting time to come together and make sure that we are in alignment. And what are, though, in the midst of these big things like AI, these big issues that we might be facing, or whatever your product or service is, whatever's happening in the workforce, the places that are then coming together and saying, all right, we're not going to solve it all at once, but let's be in alignment around those 1, 2, or 3 things that we're going to give our focus and our attention to, and make sure that we're in alignment with that. I would say that, again, and this is all stuff within teams and organizations right now, but we're at a very low engaged environment. Gallup we're at employee engagement hit a 10-year low. Another stat, only 23% of employees right now say they trust their leader in the future direction of the organization. Only 20% of employees say they feel connected to their organizational culture, and yet 90% of them say that's exactly what I want. So the opportunity is to help create that connectivity tissue within our teams and organizations and help people engage in that. What is the meaning, the purpose behind this? What is the contribution that we all make? And how do we engage with people no matter where they are, and continue that culture is not an add-on, it's in everything that we do. And I see places that are realizing if we don't do that, we become an organization that becomes a revolving door, or it's easy for people to say, well, I'll go find that somewhere else.
Yeah, leaders who do that really well, I would argue that might be, and very well put, that might be the most valuable strength that's highly valued in the future by top leaders and executives and organizations, is people who are able to do that, because it's that connective tissue that will be the hardest to protect in the future too. That's a good thought.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, I think it's a fascinating time, and I think we're in the midst of that transition right now, where more and more leaders are realizing that that's the temperature they set and the culture they create with the people around them is the greatest competitive advantage they have. And so it's exciting times. Well, Tom, I could talk about this all day with you, buddy. I appreciate you sharing your insights. We're going to put all kinds of things in the show notes to find out more about Tom's new book. We'll have a link in the show notes to this so that you can find that and track down any of the stuff about the work that Tom's involved in. I just want to say, man, I appreciate the spirit of the work that you do. I appreciate the great thoughtfulness and obviously study and research that you bring to the work, and the contributions that you're trying to make to help move not just work, but humanity, and thinking about with meaning and purpose and intentionality. So really appreciate you joining the show today and having this chat.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
All right, everybody. Thanks for listening in. I hope today's episode got you thinking in some great ways. I hope it, again, allowed you to step back and think about the temperature that you're setting in your own life and your work. I hope some of Tom's words and this conversation breathes some good oxygen into you and helps you think about that temperature, that culture that you're trying to set with the people around you, and what ultimately is the meaning and the purpose and the contribution that you're hoping to make next. Again, I'll remind everybody to subscribe, to rate the podcast, to leave an authentic review. And if this is meaningful to you, then I hope you'll share it with team members, colleagues, share the episode and say, hey, let's think about this and let's talk about it together and how this might nudge us forward. So thanks again for being a part of today's conversation. And lastly, I'll just remind us all to step back, remember, be a thermostat, and breathe good oxygen. Thank you for listening to today's podcast, and I hope the messages and questions stimulate positive change along your path. As always, if these messages resonate with you and add value to your life, I hope you'll help amplify them throughout the world. Please rate, comment, and share on whatever podcast or social media platform you're using, and share this podcast with the people in your life or work who should be part of these conversations. That way, this spirit does, in fact, spread. If these messages or developing leaders and culture would be helpful to you and your organization, please contact us at jasonvbarger.com, jasonvbarger.com. And remember, we are all ambassadors for the culture we want to create in our life and work. We have to own the vision we want to be a part of. The future of leadership is you, is me, is us. be a thermostat.